I had always believed that life had a way of working out perfectly. I was in my mid-20s, newly married to the love of my life, and living in a peaceful, tight-knit neighborhood. We had a cozy little house with a garden that looked like it came straight out of a magazine. The world outside felt like a blur of calm, and every day was filled with simple joys. My husband, James, was everything I had ever wanted. Charming, funny, attentive. He was the kind of partner that made you feel like you were his whole world. He was by my side at every turn, supporting me, making me feel special. And then there was Sarah, my best friend, my neighbor. She and I had grown up together, and our bond was unbreakable. We shared everything, laughs, tears, even the smallest details of our lives. She was more like a sister to me than just a friend. It felt like nothing could ever shake our perfect little world. But then, things started to change ever so subtly at first. At first, it was easy to brush off little things like James being on his phone a bit too much or Sarah seeming a little distracted during our regular get-togethers. I told myself I was imagining it, convincing myself that life couldn't possibly throw something so cruel into our lives. I convinced myself that nothing was wrong, but deep down, a strange feeling began to stir, an unshakable unease that grew louder each passing day. James was working longer hours, and Sarah began acting distant. She would cancel plans last minute or not respond to my calls, and when we did meet, something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. It was as though they were slipping away from me in ways I couldn't explain, and yet I tried to deny it. I didn't want to believe it. One evening, after a long day at work, I decided to surprise James by coming home early. I had a feeling that tonight would be different, that tonight, everything would change. As I walked through our street, I noticed something strange. His car was parked in front of Sarah's house. I paused, confused. I never thought much of their friendship, but this felt different. I convinced myself it was nothing, but something deep inside pushed me to keep walking. I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to see for myself, so I kept walking, not wanting to jump to conclusions. But then I saw them through the window, laughing, touching each other in a way that no best friend should. They were more than friends. They were crossing a line that shouldn't have been crossed, and in that moment, my heart shattered. I stood there, frozen for what felt like hours, the cold evening air biting at my skin, but I couldn't move. The world around me felt like it was spinning. I was no longer in control. I had to confront them, had to hear them admit it, though I already knew. With a shaky breath, I stormed into Sarah's house. She looked startled, but the guilt in her eyes was unmistakable. James walked in moments later, his face pale, and he immediately began with excuses, promises that it was a mistake, that it was nothing, that I should just forgive him. But how could I? How could I forgive either of them when everything I thought I knew had been nothing but a lie? Sarah tried to explain, her voice trembling, but nothing she said could undo what I had seen, what I had felt in that moment. The betrayal wasn't just with James, it was with Sarah too, someone I trusted like a sister. The words we exchanged were harsh, painful, but nothing could bring back what we once had. She confessed that she had always had feelings for James, and the truth hit me harder than anything I could have prepared for. It wasn't just an affair, it was a betrayal of a friendship I thought was unbreakable. James, too, seemed remorseful, but the damage had been done. He tried to play the victim, claiming he had been caught in the moment, but I wasn't buying it. The truth was undeniable, and in that moment, I realized that no amount of regret or promises could undo the pain they had caused me. The days that followed were a blur. I moved out, unable to face them, unable to stay in a house that held so many lies. I moved back in with my parents for a while, surrounded by their comfort and familiarity, but nothing could soothe the ache inside me. I didn't know who to trust anymore, and I questioned everything, the love I thought I had, the friendship that had been my anchor, all of it. But with time, I began to heal. I rediscovered parts of myself I had forgotten, parts that were strong, independent, and capable of moving on. I learned that sometimes the most painful betrayals are the ones that teach us the most. They force us to face the truth, even when it hurts, and push us to become the person we were always meant to be. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. It was a lesson in self-worth, in trusting my instincts, and in knowing that I deserved better than the lies I had been told. Moving on wasn't a linear journey, but with every step, I reclaimed my life, piece by piece. And while I'll never forget the pain, I've learned to forgive myself for trusting the wrong people. Because in the end, the only person I could truly count on was myself. For the first 2 years of our marriage, life was everything I had hoped for. We lived in this small, cozy house that we had poured so much of ourselves into planting flowers in the garden, picking out the perfect furniture for the living room, and spending long weekends hosting friends and family. It felt like a dream come true. Our backyard was my sanctuary, a little patch of green where we could escape the busyness of life. I would sit outside with a cup of tea in the mornings, watching the sun rise over the fence, and everything just felt right. James and I were happy, or at least, that's what I thought. Then there was Sarah. She lived right next door, and we had been best friends for as long as I could remember. Growing up together, we shared everything, every secret, every tear, every laugh. It was the kind of friendship that felt unshakable, the kind where you could always count on the other person to show up when you needed them. Sarah and I had this rhythm between us, this unspoken understanding. Even now, after getting married, we kept up our late-night chats, our impromptu Sunday brunches, and our hours-long catch-up sessions over wine. It was simple, but it was perfect. Our little neighborhood felt like our own world, and nothing could disrupt the calm we had created. But things slowly started to shift, and at first, I didn't even notice. It began with small, seemingly insignificant changes. James started becoming more secretive with his phone. He would take it everywhere, even when he was just going to the bathroom or stepping outside to grab the mail. It wasn't something I was worried about at first. He'd always been protective of his privacy, so I brushed it off as nothing. But then there was the way he would suddenly stop texting me back, even when it seemed like he'd usually reply within minutes. Sometimes he'd leave his phone on the table and wouldn't even look at it when I asked who he was talking to. It was subtle, but I noticed. The changes didn't stop there. On a few occasions, he canceled plans last minute, saying he had work or that he was too tired, but it wasn't like him. We'd always made time for each other, no matter how busy life got. I remember one weekend, I had planned this beautiful dinner at home, all of his favorite dishes, candles, the works. He canceled an hour before, saying he had to meet a client unexpectedly. I tried to understand, but a small voice in the back of my mind started whispering that something wasn't right. He was always so thoughtful, so committed to us. But now it seemed like he was pulling away in ways that didn't quite add up. I told myself it was probably work stress, or maybe it was just the pressures of married life catching up to us. Maybe it was just a phase and things would go back to normal soon. So I tried not to dwell on it. I convinced myself I was overthinking, that I should trust him like I always had. After all, we were happy, weren't we? We had our home, our life, and our future ahead of us. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, something I couldn't quite see yet, but I couldn't ignore it forever. Over the next few weeks, my unease only deepened. The small, odd behaviors that I had brushed off as nothing now seemed to be mounting into something I couldn't ignore. Sarah, who had always been my closest confidant, was suddenly unreachable. Whenever I called her, she was busy. If I dropped by, she'd say she had plans or was caught up with work. It wasn't like her at all. Our routine of spontaneous hangouts and endless conversations had always been a highlight of my life, but now it felt like I was being pushed aside. I tried not to take it personally at first, telling myself maybe she was just going through something. But the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. At the same time, James's behavior was becoming harder to ignore. He'd started working later and later, claiming there were pressing matters at work that kept him occupied. At first, I bought into it. He was always ambitious, and I understood that. But as the days turned into weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that his late nights were something more. He would often come home late, tired and distracted, but there was this strange coldness about him. He didn't greet me with the same warmth he used to. The distance between us was growing, and no matter how hard I tried to bridge it, I felt like I was slowly losing him. Then came the night that would change everything. After a long day at work, I decided to surprise James by coming home early. I wanted to shake things up a bit, do something nice for him, maybe rekindle that spark that had started to fade. I was eager to see him and maybe even cook his favorite meal. I walked past Sarah's house on my way home, but something caught my attention. James's car was parked in her driveway. It struck me as odd, especially since I knew Sarah hadn't invited him over alone. They didn't have plans, or at least none that I knew of. I stopped in my tracks, confusion and anxiety creeping up my spine. My heart began to race as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. I stood there for a moment, trying to gather my thoughts, but all I could do was stare at the car. A strange impulse took over me, and before I could stop myself, I walked closer. I peeked through the window, my stomach in knots. What I saw next would haunt me forever. Inside, James and Sarah were sitting close together on the couch. They were laughing, sharing moments that felt intimate in a way that no best friends should. They leaned in toward each other, their faces too close for comfort. At one point, Sarah touched his arm, and James smiled in a way I hadn't seen in months, like he was genuinely happy. They hugged, and in that moment, the world around me seemed to crash down. The picture was clear. They weren't just friends. They were something more. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt a surge of panic. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The betrayal was too much to process all at once. I turned and ran to Sarah's door, my body trembling. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I couldn't stand there and pretend everything was fine anymore. I barged into her house, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and hurt. What the hell is going on? I demanded, my breath coming in short gasps. Sarah jumped up, clearly startled, her face pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out at first. It was as if she was trying to process what was happening. Then she stammered, trying to explain, trying to make excuses, but it was all so disjointed. I could see it in her eyes. She was guilty. She tried to deny it, of course, but the tension in the room was undeniable. She looked at me as if she wanted to say something to make it better, but there was nothing left to say. The truth was out. And then James walked in. He looked guilty, but his expression didn't reflect the regret I was hoping for. Instead, he looked like a deer caught in the headlights, his face flushed. He opened his mouth to speak, but his words were the ones I had been dreading. "It's a mistake," he said quickly, but there was no conviction in his voice. He sounded defensive, as if trying to justify what had happened, rather than showing the remorse I needed from him. "It didn't mean anything," he continued, but I couldn't hear him anymore. All I could feel was this overwhelming sense of betrayal that threatened to crush me. Sarah, the person I had trusted like a sister, was the one who had shattered that trust. And James, my husband, was the one who had broken our vows. They were both standing there, but neither of them seemed truly sorry. The pain I felt was suffocating, and the only thing I knew in that moment was that everything had changed. The weight of everything hit me harder than I could have ever prepared for. I stood there in Sarah's living room, surrounded by the very people who I had trusted most, yet now they felt like strangers. The disbelief was suffocating. My mind replayed all the moments that had once seemed perfect, the dinners, the laughter, the quiet nights spent together. But now, those memories felt tainted, like a lie that had been crafted to keep me in the dark. Every smile, every touch, every moment we had shared was now laced with the bitter sting of betrayal. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, a deep, aching rage that I didn't even know how to express. But what hurt more than anything was the sadness, the crushing sadness that my trust had been shattered by the two people I thought I could rely on. I had been so sure of them, so certain of the life we were building together. And now? Now I felt completely alone. I had no idea who I could trust anymore. They had taken something from me that I couldn't get back, my belief in the goodness of the people closest to me. The emptiness inside me seemed endless, and all I could do was cry, angry at the unfairness of it all. The next day, I tried to speak to Sarah. Maybe I could get some answers, some explanation for what had happened. I wanted to hear it from her, why she did this, how she could betray me like this. When I finally found the strength to confront her, I wasn't prepared for what she said. At first, she hesitated, almost like she was trying to decide how much she wanted to reveal. Then, in a quiet voice, she admitted something that sent a shockwave through my entire being. I've always had feelings for him, she confessed, her words dripping with guilt and shame. I never meant to hurt you, but I just couldn't help it. It felt like the ground beneath me was crumbling away. How could she have hidden something like that for so long? All these years of friendship, all these moments we had shared, and all this time, she had been harboring feelings for my husband. The friendship I thought we had was nothing but a facade. She wasn't the person I thought she was. I had confided in her, shared my fears, my dreams, and my happiness with her, never once suspecting that she had been plotting behind my back. I couldn't believe it. The bond we had shared was shattered in an instant. Sarah didn't feel the same way about me that I had thought she did. She wasn't my best friend. She was someone who had used me as a cover for her own selfish desires. Her apology didn't change anything. It didn't make it hurt less. All I could think about was how everything I had ever believed and had been a lie. Later that evening, I sat down with James, my husband, hoping that maybe, just maybe, he would give me something that could explain all of this. I wanted to understand. I needed to understand. I wanted to know how he could do this, why he could betray me in the most intimate way possible. But his response was as empty as I feared. It just happened, he said, brushing it off like it was something trivial, like it didn't matter. His tone was flat, almost indifferent, as if this affair meant nothing, as if it was something I should just get over. He tried to explain it away, saying he wasn't sure why it happened or how it started, but he made no effort to own up to the gravity of what he had done. It wasn't remorse I saw in his eyes. It was guilt, yes, but not the kind that said he regretted hurting me. It was guilt because he had been caught. It was at that moment I realized how little he valued me, how little he had ever valued our marriage. It wasn't like I planned it, he continued, as though that would make everything better, as though that would somehow make the betrayal less painful. I felt numb, my heart sinking deeper with every word he spoke. The pain of his betrayal, of his dismissive attitude, was unbearable. How could someone who had promised to love and cherish you betray you so easily? The questions that had been swirling in my mind grew louder with each passing second. Did he ever love me? Or was I just a placeholder in his life, someone to keep up appearances while he secretly pined for someone else? Was our entire relationship a lie, a carefully crafted story to make it seem like we were happy when all along he had been seeking something or someone else? I tried to make sense of everything, but it was like trying to hold water in my hands. The harder I tried to understand, the more everything slipped through my fingers. I had given him my trust, my love, and my future. And what had he given me in return? A shattered heart and a marriage built on lies. He hadn't even had the decency to be honest with me until I caught him. And even then, he didn't seem to care enough to apologize for the pain he had caused. Everything felt like a cruel joke, and the punchline was that I was the only one who hadn't seen it coming. It was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make. Leaving him was something I never imagined I would do, but standing in the rubble of my marriage, I knew there was no other choice. I wasn't going to stay in a relationship built on lies and betrayal, not when I knew I deserved so much more. I packed my bags in silence, not knowing whether the weight in my chest was from the heartbreak or from the relief of finally making a choice for myself. My husband was sitting in the living room, his eyes hollow, his expression one of confusion mixed with guilt. He said nothing as I walked past him, but I could feel his gaze on my back, almost as if he was waiting for me to turn around, to give him another chance. But there was nothing left to say. I walked over to Sarah's house, her front door wide open, and I stood there for a moment, wondering how it had all come to this. She looked at me, eyes wide, but there was no apology in her eyes, only a sense of shame that barely touched the surface. "I'm done," I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. "You and him, you both betrayed me, and I'm not going to stick around for this." With that, I turned and left, my heart breaking with each step, but my resolve growing stronger. I was leaving the life I thought I knew, but I wasn't leaving without a sense of purpose. I wasn't going to be anyone's second choice. Not ever again. I moved back to my parents' house, the place I had once fled from to start my own life. It felt like a step backward, but in reality, it was the first step forward. For the first few days, I felt lost. Broken. I had no idea who I was without him, without her, without the life I thought we were building. But time, as it always does, began to heal the wounds. I started rediscovering parts of myself that I had neglected. I picked up hobbies I had abandoned, painting, writing, and even yoga. I spent time with old friends who reminded me of who I was before all of this. Slowly but surely, the pain started to ease. I wasn't healed, not completely, but I was no longer defined by the betrayal. I began to find joy in the small things again, like cooking meals for myself, walking in the park, and laughing with my parents. In the process, I met new people, new friends who lifted me up when I felt like I might fall. I felt empowered in a way I hadn't in a long time. I wasn't the woman who had been cheated on anymore. I was someone who had stood up for herself, who had made the tough decision to walk away and start over. Looking back now, I realize how much the betrayal shaped me. It was the catalyst for change, for growth, for rediscovery. I learned that trust is fragile, and it's something that, once broken, can never truly be repaired unless both people are willing to put in the effort. I learned about my own worth, that I deserved honesty, respect, and love. And above all, I learned that I didn't need anyone else to complete me. I was whole on my own. I will never forget what happened. The pain will always be a part of me, but I have learned to turn that pain into strength. I've learned to never settle for less than I deserve. No more lies, no more betrayal. I will always choose myself, no matter what. And with that, I began to embrace my new life, knowing that the best days were still ahead of me. Looking back on everything, I can see now how the betrayal, as painful as it was, tested me in ways I never expected. It shook me to my core, but in the end, it helped me find something I'd lost along the way, myself. I no longer let anyone's actions define my worth. I've reclaimed my sense of self and my strength. What I went through is no longer something that holds me down, but a chapter of my life that helped me grow and become wiser. I've learned to trust my instincts and to never let anyone, no matter how close, take advantage of my kindness or my trust. If you're going through something similar, I want you to hear this. Trust yourself. Know your worth and never compromise on it, no matter how much it hurts. You are worthy of love, respect, and honesty. And even in the darkest moments, remember, you have the power to rise again. Sometimes, the most painful betrayals lead us to the most empowering moments in our lives. And in the end, we always find a way to rise from the ashes.